Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Wells. I write horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and I talk about games on the internet. Today, I'm going to talk about Spire. The Spire is one of the most exciting role playing games that I have seen come out in a very long. It's an indie game published by Grant Howitt and Christopher Taylor. They're the same people that did Warrior Poet that I talked about a couple of months ago. Anyway, The Spire is a fantasy dystopia game in which all of the player characters are drow who live in a gigantic mountain-sized city called the Spire that is ruled by high elves, and the drow are leading a shadowy revolution to destroy them and bring them down. It is intricately designed in the world building. There is so much going on here, and it is so cool. But it's also very simple and easy to get into. And the game mechanics are a wonderful blend of fantasy adventure with magic and combat and everything like that, and then combined with all of the revolutionary stuff. You are secret warriors, you are terrorists, you are freedom fighters, you are trying to get out from under the boot heel of these oppressive high elves and lead your people to freedom. Before we get too far into the mechanics and stuff, and I do want to talk about all of that and the world building, I want to give a special shout out to the art. You can see here it has a very distinct art style. The illustrations are all from a guy named Adrian Stone. And you can see he's got kind of a Mike Mignola Hellboy vibe going on. This is Mike Mignola. And this is Adrian Stone. Kind of a similar sensibility. I don't know. It really just sings to me. Oops, pushed the wrong button there. I love this guy's work. Everything about it is just, it's dark and it's beautiful and it is evocative. Let's take a look at this one. Just really neat stuff. So, huge props to Adrian Stone for his work on this. Anyway, let's get into the book itself and take a look at how this works mechanically. Okay? We're going to start with the character sheet. Boom! So, character creation is pretty simple. Okay, I'm actually going to backtrack slightly. The Spire is this big, enormous building, and we can show you a cool map of it right here. So you can see that there is, in the background here down at the bottom, there's a larger city that kind of extends out. And there are some details in the book about what exists beyond the Spire itself. But the game takes place in the Spire, and that's one of the big differences from this and any other fantasy RPG, is that you're not going to be exploring the wilderness. You're not going to be, out in a forest or a mountain or anything like that. You are going to be in this giant skyscraper arcology, just fighting for freedom the whole time. One thing that it does talk about the surrounding world, and this publisher actually does put out a couple of other books that take place in the same world. But one of the key details is that the drow homeland is actually racked by war. Civil war and, invasions and things like that. And so refugees are flooding into Spire all the time. So there's a kind of an endless string of poor, oppressed drow coming in, looking for a better life, and finding nothing. So this is it. This is the Spire. And it's just gargantuan. And inside of this, it's big enough that up at the top there are entire palaces contained inside of this one big building. Um, these little things over to the side kind of show you what it looks like. If you were to take this giant thing and chop it up and then get a top-down look, you could see, well, there's an undercity at the bottom, and then you have Pilgrim's Walk right here, and then it talks about Pilgrim's Walk over here, and so there's different things. This is the middle city, and this part that sticks out, there's actually a lot of people that live off the side of it. It's called the Perch, where people will, they have escaped through ventilation holes or windows or whatever, and they are outside just kind of building, little habitats or shacks or huts onto the outside of the spire so that they can live out there, or dangling by ropes from some of these overhangs. And that's one of the key areas of the city. And then the higher up you get, until you get to the Solar Basilica, the Amaranth, and then New Heaven, this is where the High Elves live. And they have all the power, and they are in charge of everyone. And the drow used to control this city, but now it's all the High Elves. The High Elves have something that they call the Durance, where they will allow the drow to live in the city if they give 4 years of their life in servitude, and that is called the Durance. And so, however you spent your Durance, that will change the experience that you have. And for some people, that's just hard labor. The drow don't get to choose what their Durance is. The High Elves will say, well, we just need someone down in the sewers mucking them out. Or maybe you get really lucky and they say, well, we need someone who can clean our house. Or we need someone who can handle our business affairs. And then you get to live in relative luxury, but you are still essentially an indentured servant or a slave, and with no real freedom. Also, the Durance, you don't get paid for it. You get a pittance of room and board, and then you just do your best. So anyway, now let's go look at the character sheet, and that is actually the first thing that you will pick, is your Durance. What did you do? And let's have a look at the Durances. So what you did as, so let's say you were a builder. Then you get Fix as a skill and Technology as a domain, and then you get just some little things. Okay? Little bit of background. If you were a guard, then you get a bonus to your reputation, which is one of your resistances, and then Order as a domain. Okay, so the Durance will give you a couple of extra bonuses and kind of add on to whatever your character class is. Let's talk about some of these things. The game has a set of skills, and it has a set of domains. And then you have resistances. These are kind of like your hit points. It isn't really hit points, though. And each of the resistances takes a different kind of damage, or represents a different kind of stress. The game doesn't talk about damage, it talks about stress. And a lot of the time, even your actions will cause you stress, because you are giving up something or you are sacrificing something in order to accomplish what you need to do. So when you need to make a roll in the game, you will, there will be a skill or there will be a domain. You want to break into a house. Well, that is part of the crime domain. Okay? And maybe also the sneak skill. And so you use D10s, 10-sided dice. And if the action that you want to take matches a skill that you have, you get a D10. If it matches a domain that you have, you get a D10. And if you have mastery in it, you will also get a D10. The maximum is 3 D10. Mastery comes when you get a skill or a domain twice. So let's say that you have the Fix skill, and then through whatever means, leveling up or however it works, you get the Fix skill a second time. That means you choose for yourself a mastery. That is, you can fix anything you want, but you are better at fixing this one thing. Maybe it's weapons, or maybe it's clothing, or maybe it's architecture, whatever it is. Okay? So then, let's go here to this chart. You roll your d10s, and you pick the highest one, and you compare it to this chart. So if you roll a 1, if your highest d10 is a 1, that's a critical failure, and you will take double the stress from your own action. And then a failure, you still take some stress. Success at a cost, you succeed, but you take some stress. A great success with no stress at all. And then if you roll a 10, it's a critical success, which means you inflict extra stress on your enemy. Okay? That is the dice roll mechanic. There's no other things. You have your skill, you have your domain, you have your mastery, and then you roll the dice and compare it to that chart. It's actually really simple and really slick. And one of the things that I really like is that combat, for example, the bad guys don't roll. They don't have anything that they're, they don't have their own stats. They don't have that sort of stuff because the characters are possibly inflicting stress on themselves. So let's say that you get into a combat situation where you are trying to sneak through somewhere and find someone. You want to bribe an official to get you what you want. But his guards catch you, and so a fight starts in the hallway. And you pull out your sword or your pistol or whatever it is so that you can attack. And then if you roll really well, then you succeed and you inflict some stress on the enemy. If you roll poorly, then you fail and they inflict stress onto you. And so you don't have to worry about stats for the bad guys because it all works out. And that actually does make combat flow a lot more quickly, which is great. But let's look back at the character sheet. The roles and the stress work in a lot of different arenas, not just combat. So, blood, that is your resistance to damage. Okay? Now, these are called resistances. This doesn't mean that you, ignore damage. That's what armor is for. Okay? What this means is that you start with 5 slots of physical resistance. So when you take damage, you mark those slots off. And that's how that works. And we'll talk about stress, we'll talk about fallout in a minute. But then we have mind. This is how much you can resist. Well, let's just find the thing that talks about stress. Here we go. The mind covers mental stress, instability, and insanity. How well you can resist mental stress. Silver is loss of money or resources. And this is really clever because it is tracked exactly the same way as physical damage and as mental damage. You're basically taking financial damage. And so there are some abilities that some of the classes have where if you want to accomplish something, that is going to require you to take some stress in silver, which is, analogous to you have just spent some money. Shadow is loss of secrecy, damage to cover identities, or police and government attention. And so maybe there are certain abilities that will cause shadow damage because you are being seen, because you're being found out. There's actually one of the character classes called a firebrand who has a special ability that activates when all of their shadow stress is filled up. And that means essentially they are completely out in the open. Everyone knows who they are and what they're doing. And that's when this power kicks in called lead from the front, where they stand up and they shout, "This is tyranny. We will not take this anymore." And all the eyes are on them. Reputation is loss of social standing in a group or a community. And so if you take reputation damage or reputation stress, that means that your standing is getting lower or people think less of you. So anyway, those 5 kinds of stress are really neat and I like them a lot. Now the way that you use those is that the game master will actually keep track of how much stress you are taking. And every time you take stress, the game master will check for fallout. And that is very simple. You take some stress. We'll go back to our fight with those guards, right? So the guards are fighting. The guy rolls to shoot one. He rolls poorly enough that the guard shoots him. And then he ends up taking some damage, some blood stress. And so he marks that. And the game master marks that and says, oh, you just took 3 stress in blood. I'm going to check for fallout. Fallout means you roll a d10, and if you roll less than the amount of stress that character has in total in that category, then something bad has happened. And let's see if we can find the little track. It could be minor fallout, moderate fallout, or severe fallout. And those are basically just kind of narrative definitions. There are little things that you can pick through here, so the game master doesn't have to come up with something on the fly every time. You just took some minor blood fallout. Well, maybe you're bleeding, maybe you're stunned, maybe adrenaline, maybe you're tired. And there's little things for all of these. Let's say you took some shadow fallout. You took too much shadow stress, you rolled fallout, still only minor fallout, so you're a little compromised. A friendly NPC asks you to justify your strange behavior. Why are you acting so weird? And then all of a sudden you're like, well, crap. The gig isn't up yet, but it might be soon. And then there are, moderate and even severe fallout. If you get severe fallout in silver or shadow, which is money and secrecy, you have sold out your allies in exchange for massive bribes to get you out of debt. There's all these huge things can happen. So fallout is a really neat system that I like a lot. The way the resistances and the stress works, it makes the game run very smoothly. There's only one mechanic that governs all different kinds of damage, whether it's physical or financial or anything else. It's really neat. Now, as you are making a character, okay, right? We've talked about how the resistances work, skills and domains. You picked endurance, and then you're going to pick a class. And the classes are super cool. A class is going to give you a couple of special abilities and do some neat stuff for you. Knacks, where it says knacks here, that's masteries. It kind of uses those two words interchangeably. Classes give you abilities, but they also give you bonds, which I love a lot. Let's take a look at what a bond is. So bonds are connections that you have to other people. And the game divides these into 4 categories. There are individual bonds, street level bonds, and then big, huge bonds, which I can't remember what the biggest kind of bond is. But then the 4th kind is bonds with the other player characters. And bonds can be used to get things that you need. Okay? So let's say, for example, that you want to get a contact to do something for you. They're going to give you a weapon, or they're going to hide you, or they're going to give you some information. So this is done exactly like all of the other skills and combats we've been talking about, where you roll a die, and depending on the level of your bond and how well you know that person, that governs what they can do for you and also how many dice you roll. And so you'd say you roll well, you get a success, your bond, your contact gives you something. You roll poorly, that takes stress. You have asked too much of them. They don't have a thing to give you, or they don't have a way to help you, and also maybe that bond has been damaged a little bit because you're asking too much, you're putting them at risk because they're just as oppressed as you are. In that case, then bonds can have their own kind of fallout. They can take their own kind of damage and then potentially lose the bond altogether. So bonds are really neat. Now, finally, we're going to look at the different classes. You choose your endurance, like I said, and then we have a lot of different really unique classes. An Azurite is like a trader, a merchant, someone who has enough authority, enough power as a drow that they can kind of interact at a higher society level. They probably have some bonds with maybe even high elves. You don't know. Bound. The bound is someone who lives in the perch, dangling off the side of the spire, like I said. And so, actually, one of their equipment is ceremonial red binding ropes that they use to not fall off the side of the building. But also, they have a god knife or a god axe. Part of their religion, the religion of the drow, is that there are tiny gods, and you can use rituals to infuse them into objects. And so the bound is like a, well, let's get this cool picture. They're like this cool Batman-y warrior thing that can climb around on the outside of the spire, that can climb up on tall places inside of the spire, and has an enchanted weapon that they can use to swing around and attack people and do neat things. The Carrion Priest. On the very top of the spire, out in the sun and the moon and the wind and the weather, is where these carrion priests live. And they have pet hyenas, and they worship this carrion god. And they have their own neat little powers. The Firebrand is the one that I talked about that is trying to, they're the rabble rouser. They're the one who's actually out in public agitating for change and saying, we've been oppressed too long, flock to my banner, let's rise up. Idols is a character class that is incredibly beautiful, and they are either a singer or a performer of some kind, and everyone wants to pay attention to them. They make a good face. They have kind of some specific powers with life and soul of the party. People like to be near you. Once per session, so long as there are people nearby and a place to have it, you can create an instant gathering with dancing, games, drinking, eating, and chatting. The party gives you mastery to persuade, deceive, or distract actions performed within it. And then Glamour is another power that lets them create illusions, get people to like them, get people to pay attention to them. That's kind of what the idol does. The Knight is really funny. The Knight they are the descendants or the inheritors of an ancient order that hundreds of years ago, the Knights were these, kind of proud, chivalrous warriors that we tend to think of with the word knight. But this is not that kind of a world. And at this point, hundreds of years later, those knights have essentially just devolved into gangs. And so someone who is a knight is a hooligan. They are a gang member. They are a thug. They are running around, causing problems, beating people up, getting drunk. I think that's really funny. A Lajan is like they are the chosen of the glorious lady, who is the moon goddess. And they have some special abilities they can do. They are a powerful magic-using class. There are the Masked. The Masked are people who have spent their durance working with the High Elves, and even today they still have the facility, the experience required to move in those upper circles. And they're incredibly powerful politically, as powerful as a drow can be in this oppressed society. And so they get a lot of that done. Midwives are really cool. So the drow, despite being mammals, do lay eggs, kind of these little fleshy egg sac things. And the midwives are actually drow that have some spider blood. They are descended from ancient spider gods. And they kind of keep that bloodline pure. And then they become the people who tend to these eggs and make sure that they hatch properly. And they are a fascinating class. The Vermissian Sage is maybe my favorite one, just because of how cool it is. So at one point in the history of the Spire, somebody came through and tried to build a mass transit system, like a subway system. But they were trying to do it through this very kind of touchy, extra-dimensional magic technology combo that failed rather catastrophically. And so that's not around, that mass transit system doesn't exist, but the tunnels that were carved through extra-dimensional space, non-Euclidean space, are still there. And the Vermissian sages are drow who still have access to it. Those tunnels are kind of hidden. They're in the walls. They can go between the walls. They are a weird... that space is extra-dimensional and very bizarre. It doesn't follow natural rules or natural laws of physics. And these sages use it as a way to store information, because the high elves oppress the people so much that they're not allowed to have books. They're not allowed to keep records. They're not allowed to do any of this stuff. And so the sages are effectively extra-dimensional librarian warriors who kind of find these weird little dimensional pockets and tunnels in the hallways and walls of the Spire and can slip in and out of them to travel and to store information, then and also to research information. So their core abilities, they've got backdoor, where anywhere in the Spire, once per session, if they need to, they can find a backdoor into that vault, the Vermissian vault, which is what they call all those extra-dimensional spaces. And then in the vault, they have abilities that let them, find research. Obsessive Researcher says, at the start of each session, gain a knack of your choosing in any skill or domain, even if you don't normally have access to the skill or domain, because you have taken the time to go, well, I don't know anything about stealing, but I really need to steal something this time, and so I'm going to go do all of that research and gain a knack in it, which is super cool. As long as we're here on the Vermissian Sage, let's take a look at the rest of it. So once you have picked a class, you have resistances. So you've got those 5 resistances we saw on the character sheet, in which you have 5 slots as a base in each one. A Vermissian Sage gets 3 extra slots for mind resistance and 1 extra slot for shadow resistance. It's easier for them to resist mental damage and easier for them to stay hidden and secret. They have a refresh ability, which is anytime they uncover hidden information, those kind of daily powers come back. Their class skills are Investigate and Compel, and their domains are Academia, Occult, and Technology. So on this thing, you would click off Compel and Investigate and Academia and Occult and Technology. And those are the things that you're good at. So when you need to roll dice, you get to roll extra dice when you do those. Then you have bonds. You start the game with 2. In the case of the Vermissian Sage, you have an individual level bond with an academic, researcher, or guardian of the vault. Name them and their specialty. So you just write down on your character sheet, well, there's this other guardian of the vault, this other sage that I work with, and her name is blah, blah, blah. And then your second one, the second bond in every character class is with another PC. In this case, you have a bond with another PC, you know a secret about them. Say who it is, what the secret is, and whether they know you know or not. Every class has a bond with another PC, and sometimes it's like this, you know something bad about them. Other cases it's you rescued them from some horrible fate, or they rescued you, they helped you. The Carrion Priest, one of their bonds is that they helped another PC through a difficult death of a friend or family member, and they comforted them in their hour of need. And what these do is they establish not only backstory, but they tie the group all together so that you have these really solid bonds with each other. It's just a great system. Okay, so then there's equipment, then you've got your core abilities, and then you have advances. The way that advancement works in the game is let's see if we can find the advancement page. Where are you? Little advancement thing. It's being weird. Okay, advancement is down here. Anyway, depending on what you are able to accomplish. Oh, I remember now what it is. If you have changed the Spire in some way, if you've caused change, you get an advance. And that change can be good or it can be bad. Maybe you tried to do something and all you did was ruin things and your plans fell apart and now this entire district of the Spire where you live is under much harsher scrutiny, or they've put in martial law or something, and you're even more oppressed than you were before. You've caused a major change, and so you get an advance. And so depending on the level of the change you have caused, you get a low, medium, or high advance. And each class has their own set of those. So the low advances for the Vermissian Sage are things like you're able to find a connection. You are able to talk to people. You're able to get into locked areas. The medium ones suddenly get better. You can do these more exciting things. And then the high ones are just nuts. You can do all of this extra stuff that's really amazing. And some of these abilities are powerful magic. Some of them are combat based. Some of them are just social, that you're able to talk to people. And then this other thing we were looking at here, depending on your background, you can take some of these other extra advances. These are not tied to a class or even to a durance. They're just tied to something. So if you serve or have served in the City Guard, you can take City Guard advances. If you have, let's find another one here enlisted. If you've served as a soldier, then you can take these advances. There's all these extra things that can be part of your backstory, or they can come up during play, and they add a lot of cool flavor to it, and I love it. So I want to talk about this game more and more and more. But I think that you understand at this point how it works. Let's just take a look at two more lists, okay? First of all, now that I've explained a bit about the world and a bit about the characters, I just want to show you these because they are really nice distillations of what this game is about and how this game is about it. So first of all, these are the ways in which this setting is different from other fantasy. Magic is very hard. It costs something to cast. There is a penalty or a sacrifice attached to it. Magic items are incredibly rare. You're not off in the wilderness, you're always in that city. There's no morality system, and I love the way it explains this. No one thinks they're the bad guy. Everyone believes their actions are justified. No spell is going to let you detect whether someone's chaotic evil or not, which is useful because you might have to do some reprehensible things to free your people and lie to your family about it. And then last of all, there aren't any monsters. Everyone you fight in this game is a person. It is either a high elf or it is another drow. And sometimes it's another drow who is sold out to the high elves, or other times it's just another drow who is trying to live their life and doesn't want to cause any trouble, is trying to keep their head down, and you're making things difficult for them, and they're going to take you out for it. So, let's take a look at the next list here, which is things to know. Subvert, don't destroy. Your job is not to go out and blow things up. Your job is not to murder that horrible high elf official, because if you murder them, they'll just put someone else in that same place. If you blow something up, then there's not going to be anything left for you to inherit when you finally take control of Spire back again. Okay? And so what you're trying to do is subvert things. You're trying to get that official to work for you because you've bribed them or you've intimidated them. You're trying to change the way that society functions rather than destroy society. Number two, this is not a kind world. No one is going to be nice to you. You are a terrorist revolutionary inside of an oppressive magic dystopia. Bad things are going to happen, and you are going to be the cause of a lot of them. You are brave. A lot of people are hiding. You are not. You are trying to change the world. You are going to hurt people. I love that they spell that out. It is a crime to spill blood. You don't want to damage other people, especially not your fellow drow. But you're making an omelet, you got to crack some eggs. If you're going to save this world, you have to be the knife in the dark that does the dirty work to make it happen. This is going to kill you. You are, again, You are a revolutionary fighting a war against an oppressive government. You know you're going to die. You need to accept that up front, and you need to be willing to give your life for the cause. There's always another level. There's always something else going on in this game. Like I said, if you kill an official, they're just going to put a new official in, and they're probably going to be worse than the last one. There's always an extra thing. There's always a superior officer than the one you just talked to. It's a big, intricate world. Your own family would sell you out. If they find out that you're hiding illegal weapons or refugees in the house, if they find out that you're doing something you shouldn't do, they might sell you out just to protect themselves. And then last of all, the ministry would sell you out. The ministry is the freedom fighting organization. It is the resistance, the rebellion. They would sell you out in a second if it means protecting everybody else. If it means closing off a line of investigation, or if it means stopping a massive action, getting on the good side of the right official, they are in it for the long game. They are trying to secure freedom for all drow, not necessarily you. And if you need to be one of the eggs that gets cracked to make that omelet, the ministry will do it. So anyway, this game is incredibly exciting. The world is cool. The world is rich. The world is deeply unique and interesting. The character classes are all really detailed spins on classic ideas that could only exist in this world. And the mechanics are entirely designed around reproducing the feel of not only fantasy, but that dystopian, rebellious society. So, let's give it up for Spire. This is just such a cool game. The art is wonderful. The mechanics are great. The stories that you can tell with it are fantastic. They're compelling. They're really neat stuff. I really love this game, and I think that you will really love it too. So go pick up a copy of The Spire and play it, and get all your friends to play it. And thank you for watching this review. I'm Dan Wells, and you are awesome.